Hello, fellow ex-citizens. In today's episode, we are going to do something quite useful for many people. Since we did an episode on how we install our solar panels here in the XHQ building, particularly on the rooftop of the XHQ building, people have been reaching out to us, asking us, can you help me decide what to get for my solar panel and batteries and all the setup that I need to install solar power system in my home in Liberia? A lot of times, these inquiries are coming from people who are following the XCD channel. And we love to help people who are following our channel because we promise that while we are building XCD, we will also provide educational content that will be useful for people to learn. So, because we are getting a lot of inquiries on how and what people need to install solar panel system, we decided to do a free video to help people answer those questions, the very fundamental questions of what exactly should be the size of your panels. Like how many panels do you need to buy to basically get your rooftop or your home set up so that you have constant uninterrupted electricity. We found out that doing this for every individual who reach out to us is tedious and is cumbersome and it is actually repetitive. So one thing we decided to do now is to scale that. The way to scale it is to make a video where everyone can go to a single point and watch. And if they have more deeper questions, then they can reach out to us with those questions. So in this video, there will be a couple of things you will learn. One, you will learn to answer the question, given the home I'm deciding to build or I already have, what is the number of panels I will need to support all of my energy needs in the home? Two, what is the number of batteries or the capacity of battery bank that I need to create so that I can support all of my energy needs at night when there is no sun shining on the solar panels? Three, maybe we will get into that in this video or maybe in another episode, is how do I select my inverter? So your solar panel system will consist of multiple components. You will have the battery, you have the panels, and you will also have the inverter. So we'll talk about the inverter. But some of the things that makes installing a solar panel amazing is these kind of things. So you have enough light in abundance, and you can do whatever you want to do with your lights. So I'm going to teach you how basically to determine what are the things that you need in terms of the components and how to size them to get your solar working. So once we finished our work, we displayed how it looked like at night, and it was beautiful. Besides the fact that our apartment received uninterrupted constant electricity. So many people saw these and they loved it and they wanted to basically install solar power. Actually, not only because they saw this, but energy is a serious challenge in Liberia, especially electrical power for your homes. The grid electricity we all know is unreliable. So people have been asking about how can they install solar systems, and it's a trend in Liberia currently. People need to move away from the use of diesel-fueled power generators and lean towards a little bit on solar panels, or even if they can migrate totally to use solar panels, it basically has a lot of benefits over diesel fuels. Although the initial cost is high, but in the long term, it is beneficial for those who can invest into building their own solar power system for their homes. So because we've gotten a lot of those requests from people asking me, can you help me determine what I need to install a solar system for my home? I've decided to assist a lot of people at no cost. However, because I have quite a few of those requests coming in and they seem to be piling up, I cannot repetitively do that for every single person. It is exhausting, it is tiring, and I would rather be doing something else than doing something that repetitive. So I decided to do this as a way of providing a scalable solution of solving that, to create a video that will answer a couple of questions for people. And we've talked to quite a few people and we understand what are the basic questions that they want to answer when they reach out to us. One, they don't know how many solar panels to buy. They don't know how to determine what is the size of the battery bank they would need to support all of their appliances at night when there is no sun shining. So we will attempt to answer those two questions plus more in the video ahead. So let's get started. So let's first begin by just discussing what are the major components for your solar power system. And there are three components really, and they are the solar panels themselves. That's one. And component two is your inverter. And then the third component is your battery bank. So this will consist of the batteries that will be needed to store power and then basically deliver that power when you need it, particularly at nighttime when there is no sun in the sky. So the solar panel side is the power generation side, and then the inverter side is the power management side, and then the battery is the power storage or energy storage system. So let's begin by first trying to understand the solar panel side. So we'll begin by drawing a solar panel here, and we'll do the following, and see how it looks like. So in these solar panels, like, we can draw some horizontal lines here, just to basically tell you what the cells look like. And of course, you can see I'm a very great artist, so I'm sure this lecture is going to go really fun. You're going to enjoy this, guys. You can see my artistic skill. Okay, let's not do that. Instead, let's do something that is a little bit less embarrassing. Okay, so these are the cells of your solar panel, and normally you have two wires, the positive line, which is the red line. Should we maybe use a thicker line here? So we have the red wire, right, which is the positive one. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. So let's do this instead. So let's see thicker red line. So let's draw a red wire here, and then let's do another black line, the negative wires. So these wires run from your solar panels, and basically, so we have what we have here is your panel. Or sometimes you will hear people say your solar module, and these individual things are your cells. Now, this solar panel has something associated with it called the efficiency of your solar panel. So the efficiency is represented by some numbers, and that basically tells you how well this solar panel can take energy from the sun. And let's represent the sun by this hot red bar and shooting light rays here, right, on your solar panels. That is sun shining, and then the solar panel needs to convert that energy into some electrical power, and then it pushes those power or energy through the wires. The next component in your solar power system is going to be your inverter. So the inverter, again, as you know, I'm a very great artist. It's going to be represented by a box, right? And so we'll draw individual lines this time around. So this box is usually a three-dimensional box. So I'm not going to attempt to draw a 3D box here. Well, everything here is three-dimensional, really. But it would have been nice to just draw some 3D thing here, but I'm not going to try to do that. So in this thing called the inverter, there are two components, really, and I'll just draw them as boxes, really. So first, you have something here called a charge controller. So I represent that by C. The charge controller is one component of the inverter. Actually, let's do the following. Let's draw something much bigger. Okay, let's start all over, and I'm just going to do freestyling here, right? So let's draw something bigger. You'll see very soon why. So in that inverter box, we have something called the charge controller, and I'll call it CC. And then there is also another component, which is the original work that the inverter does. And this thing is what we'll get to it. So there are two main components here. Something is called a charge controller. It is in this object called the inverter. And by the way, back in the day, this charge controller used to be separate from the inverter. So you buy it separately from the inverter. But nowadays, in the modern inverters, the manufacturers put the charge controller in the inverter, so they come as a single unit. But what is the function of the charge controller, you might ask? So the function of this charge controller is actually to help regulate the power that is coming from your solar cells. You see, when the sun is shining here, the sun intensity fluctuates throughout the day. And the solar panel needs to send every power that it converts into stable, usable energy. But that energy, because it's fluctuating, it's coming into here fluctuating. But your components in your home, remember that's the final destination for all the power you are generating, do not like those fluctuating powers. Beginning with the battery itself that you are going to charge, batteries do not like to receive those type of fluctuating powers. So the function of the charge controller is to actually take the power that comes from your solar cells, right? You take those power and regulate them and send them to your third component that we are going to talk about. And that third component is your battery. So let's attempt to draw a battery. This time around, let's draw something pretty nice. Let's do this, and do this, and see if it makes perfect figure here. That's good. So now let's draw the terminals for your battery. So you have two terminals, the red terminal, which is the positive terminal, and then you also have the negative terminal, represented by a black terminal, which is your negative. And so when the power leaves from here, the first place it goes, right? It goes to charge your battery. And for you to charge your battery, we need to draw those wires again from here. So we have the black for the negative. It goes here and runs up here, and it comes here, connected here. And then we have the red wire, which is the positive. It runs from your charge controller and comes here all the way and goes into this positive terminal of the battery. And so let's actually label this our battery. So these are the three components. But again, as I said, the function of the charge controller here, you see, it just serves to regulate the power that is coming in here. And there is one thing I want to say about a charge controller. There are many types of charge controller, and this talk is not going to center around that. So I'm not going to say anything, except that I will mention there is a modern and the most efficient type of charge controller you want to buy. When you're buying inverter, this is one thing you need to ask for those of you who are using some vendors to provide these things, or maybe like if you hire someone to do your procurement of your solar materials and install them, make sure to ask for what we call a maximum power point tracker charge controller in your inverter. And I'll represent that here. I'll just write it here, MPPT. So you'll see, like on the inverter product descriptions, sometimes they will tell you this has an MPPT charge controller. And this MPPT represents maximum power point tracker. And what this does is that this charge controller monitors the power coming from your solar panel, and it monitors the maximum power, because this power fluctuates. So it's always monitoring that fluctuating curves for where that power is maximum, and it tries to optimize this for adjusting that particular maximum point so that the amount of energy it puts into here is as close as possible to what it is getting. Hence, the types of charge controller that are MPPT are much more efficient than the earlier versions of them. So I think it is so far the latest version, and it is the most optimally effective charge controller that you can get. So you want to ask for that. So that is the work of the charge controller. Now, what else do I want to say here? But how do all of these things function, right? We still haven't brought power into your house. So let's draw how your house looks like, right? And I'm just going to draw something very basic, right? So you have your house with this gable roof, and there it is. Nice looking house, right? And so in this house, you have some appliances, and you need to basically use these appliances. And the energy is being stored here during the day when this brilliant sun is shining. And sometimes during that same daytime, you need to get some energy coming into your house. So the question is, how do you get some of that power coming into your house? And to get some of that power, you need to have wires running from your inverter to your house. And those wires can run from this part of this inverter, which is really the functional part of the inverter. But before we take wires from the inverter and run them here, we need to show how basically this inverter takes that power and bring it here. And to do that, we need to again run some lines back from the battery, right? So remember, we're running now lines here. They come here into the inverter. And then we'll take the red line as well, right? Bring it, run it. So this is somehow going out of scope and comes right into the inverter. So then it is from this inverter now you will have some lines again. So I'm going to draw some red lines coming into your home, and the black line again coming into your home. So now you see the system that you want to build is finally complete. So now we go to the generation. Power is generated here, and that power that is generated is regulated by your charge controller in your inverter, and that power goes from your inverter. Once regulated, it goes to charge your battery. And simultaneously, while that power is going into your battery, because that power is already in the inverter and it has been regulated, some of that power, there's internal connection in this inverter that allows some of that power without necessarily going into the battery, but it comes right into the inverter and gets delivered. So you should assume that there's a connection between this charge controller and this other component, which is the main component of the inverter. This is the part that actually does what the inverter is supposed to do. And I'll tell you about that. Why do we have to have all of these complex loops before we bring the wires right here? Why we can just run the wires right here and bring it to your home? Well, the first obstacle to that is that we say the power coming from these panels are not regularized. They are not stable, right? They fluctuate. And think about this. If you have like a motor running in your refrigerator or maybe a light bulb and the power is just fluctuating, right? What happens to those equipments, right? They fail, right? So that's one obstacle. The other obstacle is that actually the power that is coming from here is a different type of power, and that's what we need to talk about here. So that power is called a DC current. That is the current that is coming from the solar panel. Most of your appliances in your homes use AC current. So I'm going to put the thing that is coming into here is AC current. So how do we get DC current? Suddenly becomes an AC current when it's coming into your home. And that is where the function of the inverter, that is the core function of the inverter. Remember I said earlier, the manufacturers used to have the charge controller, and up to now you can buy an independent charge controller, right? For example, if you just want to charge your battery from solar panel, you can buy this small component, which is an independent component that basically you run wire from here to your charge controller and from the charge controller to the battery. That's an independent unit without the inverter. But to answer the question, how come DC is suddenly now AC current? It is because that is the main job, the core function of the inverter in this system. And where does it do that? It does that in this box. So throughout, the power or the current that is moving from the panel to your charge controller is still DC. From your charge controller to the battery, that current is still a DC. From the battery back to your inverter, it is still DC. In fact, I'll mark here, this is still DC. This is still DC. But then from the inverter to your home, it becomes AC because this is where the inverter does that magic. Now, the other thing to talk about here is that the inverter also has an efficiency associated with it, just as we said the battery has some efficiency associated with it. And you can see where the efficiencies of the inverter matters. One, when the power, the DC voltage that is coming from this panel, it comes into here, this charge controller needs to regulate that, but not only regulate it, right, to make it stable, it has to also break down this high voltage that is coming from your solar panels. Normally, those high voltages are higher than the battery, especially in residential homes. These voltages are higher than the voltage of the battery, and we'll get to the battery. But then this inverter, which has this subcomponent here, needs to break that down to a voltage that is acceptable by the battery. So voltages that are coming from each panels normally range something like maybe sometimes as high as maybe 50 volts, right? But then regular home batteries usually are around 6 volts, 12 volts, 24 volts, and 48 volts. So this inverter needs to break that down. And this is one of the areas where you can optimize when you're setting up your system. You want to look at the voltage that is coming from your solar panel and the voltage that is coming from the battery. The closer the battery voltage is to the batteries, right? The battery system, not the individual batteries. And this is a little bit complex now. We'll get to the point where we'll talk about multiple batteries later on down the road, maybe not in this particular conversation, right? Not in this talk today. But a battery system has a voltage. That system voltage of your battery bank is what you want to bring as close as possible to this so that your inverter doesn't have to work too hard. But there's a limit to doing that, especially when you're doing residential powering, where the battery voltage usually requires a low voltage. And what you need mostly in residential powering, it is not the voltage of the battery that you want high. You want what we call the capacity of the battery. And that capacity is measured in amp hours. So it's abbreviated by the letter AH. So coming back to voltage here, so this efficiency is by how much energy is lost for this inverter to do some work. Remember, all of these things are operating, they are feeding off of the current and the power that is in the system. They are consuming some of that to operate. So they are not just delivering everything for you for free into your home. They need to harvest some of that power for them to operate, especially the inverter. It is consuming some of that power. Plus, what goes in is not equal to what comes out, right? Because some of those get lost in the components, the wires, the electrons escape and all that. But we don't need to go down all to that quantum level of discussion. All we just need to know is that these things are machines, and what you put into the machines, some of them will get lost into the work the machine has to do. It does feed on some of that food you feed it, right? And then it delivers some work. So that is how these things work. So that is why this efficiency also is affected by the efficiency of the charge controller. The next place is that it's the efficiency of the inversion of the power, right? From DC to AC. This inverter has to work hard to do that conversion. So the efficiency is affected here. So this is why when you're buying components, you need to be asking about those kind of questions. What is the efficiency? How efficient is the inverter? How efficient is the solar panel? Because all of these add up to what we call the system efficiency. The next thing I want to talk about is the batteries. Let's come to the batteries. So we talk about the batteries. In general, we consider two categories of batteries. One that is popular among residential homes and one that is popular among commercial installations. Although the second type of battery we'll talk about that is regularly mostly used in commercial installations are now available for residential installations. However, they are the low voltage forms. So they are low voltage types that are available for residential homes versus the high voltage batteries that are available for commercial installations. Now, besides low voltage, so today we'll focus on our batteries will be low voltage. That means there are voltages assigned to individual batteries. Whether you have multiple batteries in your battery bank, the individual battery voltages are low. And by low voltage, we mean batteries with voltage around like 6 volts, right? 12 volts, 24 volts battery, and 48 volt batteries. And these batteries are usually found to have the content in them, the material, the chemistry of these batteries, right? The way they process the electrons and things like that to store and generate and to store and release power. The mechanisms, the chemistry in them are lead acid batteries. The other type of batteries, which which we prefer in commercial installations, are called the LiFePO batteries, and they are lithium-ion batteries, really. But in fact, the latest version of them are LiFePO full batteries. These have different chemistries. I mean, they are lead and iron and phosphate, right? They have different chemistry than the lead and acid and battery. Sorry, they are lithium, iron, and phosphate. If I said lead, I think I said lead, iron. No, lithium. So these are lithium batteries and these are lead acid batteries. These mostly would be the batteries with the liquid in them, right? Remember these car batteries from Liberia? You know those car batteries that have the acid water in them? These are lead acid batteries. And these LiFePO batteries are different types. They are not like these. And normally these ones have higher voltages, right? Even these are now available for residential installations. So when you are buying batteries, there is something important that you need to know. The energy that you store in the amp hour that you store in the battery, the capacity of the battery. Batteries do not like to be completely exhausted. That reduces the lifespan of the battery. So you want to protect your battery to last longer, you need to restrict how much harvesting you do, how much you can take out of the battery. So lead acid batteries usually have, okay, so batteries in general, the parameter that measures how much you can harvest off your battery is called the depth of discharge, and we'll call it DOD. So this is the depth of discharge, DOD. So lead acid battery will give you about 50% DOD normally. The range between maybe 40 to 60, right? Average 50%, right? Normally. So what this implies is that when you put energy or the capacity of the battery, if the battery is filled to the brim, let's imagine you're putting water in your battery. Now, of course, you're not putting water, but okay, let's assume you're putting some good amp hour into the battery, right? And they are basically filled to the brim with that energy, that capacity to do work. It's filled to the brim. It turns out that you cannot harvest all of that energy. You can only harvest up to 50% of that energy, halfway mark. The battery will prefer to keep this. If you keep harvesting below this, you will be damaging your battery. That means your battery will not have the prescribed lifespan. So if the battery was prescribed from the factory to last 10 years, by harvesting more than 50% of this lead acid battery that has a DOD of 50%, if you keep doing that, you are going to shorten that lifespan to less than 10 years. Now, what about LiFePO batteries? LiFePO batteries, on the other hand, they normally have a very high DOD. Around 90% is not uncommon. Now, because you can harvest a lot of energy from LiFePO batteries, you would imagine if you are making choice, you want to go with LiFePO batteries. But because of their high depth of discharge, LiFePO batteries are much, much more expensive than lead acid battery. You are not getting this 90% for free. So this is where you can make the choice. Now, this depth of discharge phenomenon is actually quite important. It has implication on how many batteries you are going to basically calculate to keep into your battery bank that will be sufficient to power your home. So we will talk about this when we come to sizing your battery. But in today's talk, we will only limit ourselves to determining how do you size the number of solar panels that is needed to generate all the power needed to do all of this complex thing within a 24-hour period. Because during the day, your sun is shining. This thing is supplying power, but at the same time, you are relaxing into your home and you need some AC during the heat of the day. So the power that is generated, all of that power is not being stored. Some of it is being stored and some of it is being used during the daytime. Then at night, there is no more power coming from here, and we are going to mark that with a big X because there is no sun in the sky. The sun vanishes from the sky, right? And then at night, every power that is coming from here now is basically harvested from the battery. So the solar panel size need to support that need both during the day and at night. Furthermore, your battery as well needs to have the right capacity, accounting for the depth of discharge, so that during that perhaps 12-hour period of nighttime when there is no sun in the sky, the 50% that is harvested from here, from your total battery capacity, which means multiple batteries potentially, will still be sufficient to power your home without going into that risk zone of basically harvesting more than 50% at night. So those are the things that we are going to learn, but we will not learn all of that in one video. So today we are going to restrict ourselves to learning this. So before we go to calculating in the next part, before we go to calculating what is your, or how do you calculate the number of panels you need or the power of the panels, right, that are needed. Before we go into that, there is an important thing that I actually did not mention, which is a concept called the peak sun hours. So I'm going to represent it by the letters PSH. What is peak sun hours? The peak sun hours, the technical definition is that it is based on region. It's geographic. It's based on geographic regions you find yourself in. What it measures basically is within a given daytime period. And I'm just going to draw something here. Forgive me again for my excellent artistic skills. So this is the time dimension. And the morning, let's say the morning begins at 0 hours, 12 a.m. and it ends at 24 hours, right? Again, just close to 12 midnight, right? So 24 hours. So this time, basically, you can see them, they are on a cycle, right? So they are ring. This time and this time are actually equal, but there are 24 hours between them. That's just the point here. So when you start from here, you return back to the same point at night time, right? So that's a 24-hour period. Now let's look at this thing as the power. This is power measured here. And it is the power that is generated by your solar panel within that 24-hour period. Let's plot how that power looks like. And we're going to do a rough plot here. Let's use a red ink for that. So in the morning time, early morning, that is 12 a.m., midnight, right? There is no sun in the sky. So basically the power generated by the solar panel is still zero. It's very low. But then as the time goes on, right, at certain hours of the day, that power starts to rise, and then it rises. Then at certain hour of the day, it starts to fall. Oh, maybe I should have carried this a little bit close to that 24-hour period, right? So maybe this thing rises, and then it stays up a little bit, and then it starts to fall, and then it goes to the 24-hour period. And so there is some time between here and here, where as you can see, where your power is maximum, and you can already guess what time of the day roughly, depending on the region you are in. So let's take, for example, in Liberia, let's take these hours to be something like between maybe, what should I say, maybe 11 a.m., right? Let's do that. And then let's say 4 p.m. Let's say this time of the day, the sun is hottest. You see this bright sun that is shining? That's when it is really hot in Liberia. So during this period of time, the irradiation of the sun falling on the panels is so powerful that for every square meter of surface area of solar panels, or forget about solar panel, every square meter of area on the ground in that local region, if you were to measure the intensity of the light power that is being beamed down on the square meter area of ground in that region, you could harvest 1 kilowatt of power. And by the way, let me say that the power that we are talking about that's going into here is measured in units called watts, right? And a kilowatts, which is kW, just means 1,000 units of these watts. So what I'm saying now, the peak sun hour is defined as, in a given region, the number of hours of a day that 1 square meter of area of ground surface will basically be receiving 1 kilowatt of energy, of power from the sun. That is the number of peak sun hours. So for Liberia, and it's a very good measure of how efficient or how suitable the region is for solar installation. So Liberia, for example, has greater than 5 peak sun hours, which means it is really good. There are states in the US here that are a lot less than this 5. Some of them are between 3 to 4. There are areas, the maximum peak sun hours mostly you can find maybe will be inching towards 6. And Liberia is between 5 and 6, but I don't remember the exact decimal number. So I'll just put greater than 5 peak sun hours. So what that means, in fact, we did something great here. We said between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. So we are talking about something like, what? 5 hours here in between, right? So we are saying between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m., assuming those are the right bounds of our peak sun hours, in this time, that is when most of your energy is going to be harvested by your solar panel. So, and this peak sun hour will be very, very important as you calculate how many solar panels and the total size of your panel system, which is the core idea of this video. But before we get into that, we needed to explain all of these concepts, and we'll see why the efficiency of the solar panel and the peak sun hours are important. In fact, not only the efficiency of the solar panel, when you're calculating the size of the solar panel, you need to consider the efficiency of all of the systems, even the battery efficiency, right? But we're not talking about the DOD in calculating this. But just the efficiency of your system, right? The combined efficiency of everything is important. Because you can generate as much as possible if you don't account for the efficiency, and all of that is going to waste. Then, if you miss that efficiency factor, you are going to under-generate for your needs in this house. So that is an important concept, the peak sun hour, that I was going to tell you about. So now that we've covered that, I think you have everything here we need to go ahead and do this first part of the video, which is basically to calculate your panel size. And in subsequent videos, we'll calculate your battery size and your number of batteries you need. And then we will also do maybe a separate video to calculate what should be your inverter size. And then maybe we can talk about types of inverters. Okay, let's make progress here, guys. Great. So how do you calculate, right, your panels, your solar panel size? That is the question here. So to calculate your panel size, and we'll represent that by panel size, PS, right? Your panel size, and we'll write a big formula here. Your panel size is going to be equal to your total load. When we say load in this context, we mean what is the power, the total power that is needed by all of your appliances in your home. What is your consumption on your daily basis? So since we are talking about 24-hour period, we'll say we'll calculate all of the energy needs of all your appliances in your home. That includes charging your cell phone to running your AC machine. From the smallest and most basic thing, you need to calculate that, and that is going to be your total load. So we'll represent it by TTL, and we'll put a little 24-hour here to tell you we want this total load for a 24-hour period in one day, right? So that is that. And we put a horizontal bar, you guess right, because we're going to divide this thing by something, right? So that is the reason why we put that here. The first thing, remember, we are calculating the panel size, your panel system size here. That is what we are calculating. But if you have the total load for what you need within a 24-hour period, some of that load is like if you were just to produce that exact load, then you have not accounted for the losses that you are taking because of the system loss. And that system loss, the way to incorporate that here instead is to look at the efficiency of the system, right? So you have to divide by the efficiency of your system, the system efficiency. But that is not all, guys, because we want to see what is the total. Okay, so actually we can stop here and discuss this. If we wanted to know what is the total energy in 24 hours, right? Or the total energy in 24 hours that your system, your solar system, your panel system, your module is supposed to produce in a 24-hour period, then this formula will be exact, and that will be the end of the story. But what we want to do, and this formula is useful, by the way, this is going to give you the total energy you need to produce within a given day. But that leaves out a concept of how much energy you need to produce per hour. Because remember, we talk about the peak sun hours. Some areas have 3 peak sun hours, some areas have 4 peak sun hours, some have 5. So if I put the same panel identically produced with the same parameters, 2 identical panels, one in Liberia and say one in maybe say Minnesota, where it snows there heavily, right? The peak sun hours there is very low, especially during winter. And I put one panel in Liberia, and the sun is shining. We have enough sunshine, although we have some wet season and a rain season, but still we can have sunshine there during those times. So if I put panels there, the power you would generate per hour will be different for those panels because they have different peak sun hours. So when you're calculating how much power or energy you need to generate, right, you need to think about it at an hourly basis and say how much of that I need to generate every hour for the given peak sun hours I have so that it can meet my load capacity. So therefore, to do that, you need to multiply by the number of peak sun hours that you have in your local region. So this, guys, is going to be our magic formula for calculating what our power needed to be generated is. So, but to do this, the next question you want to ask is, but what is this total load? How do we know the total load? Because without this, you are not going to be able to calculate this panel size. So now let's think about this total load thing. So let's take an example of a household. So to know the total load, first of all, we need to know all of the appliances that are in a household. Let's take an example of a single household that has 2 light bulbs. So let's draw light bulbs. Ooh, how do we draw a light bulb? Now I'm going to do something magical here. And you're going to see this beautiful light bulb here, right? And then you have that little thing, and then you have that little grooves. That's your light bulb. So you have how many of these light bulbs? You have 2 of them. And then in the same household, you have a fan. Here is a pretty looking fan here, right? And then this fan has a stand, and that stand comes down here, right? And then it has a base, right? Da-da-da. Yeah. So this fan blows, but then you have 1 fan. Those are the total number of appliances in this house. So this house with this number of appliances, we want to calculate the total load of this. So to do that, right, we need to have a formula. And the formula we are going to use, the general formula we are going to use for calculating your load is that we're going to say the the individual load. Remember, the total load will be the sum of all of these loads, but the individual load, let's call it L, so we need to find a general formula, is equal to the power of that particular appliance multiplied by the number of the type of that appliance type, the number of that appliance type, then multiply by how many hours in time t, right? How many hours you are going to run that appliance for. This is going to be our general formula for calculating an individual load. So if you want to calculate multiple loads and sum them up, we need to use this formula on each of those load types, and then we sum them up. That will give us the total load for that home. So in this case, using this formula as our basis, we are going to now write the formula for the light bulb. So I'm going to find a formula for the bulb is equal to the power of the bulb multiplied by the number of bulbs multiplied by the time that each of those bulbs run. And then we say that the load for the fan is equal to the power of the fan multiplied by the number of fans multiplied by how long in that 24-hour period this fan is going to run. So these are the two formulas we are going to use. So for this formula, the first one, let's say this is equal to what is the power of the bulb. So this is where you have to go and check the types of light bulb you are using. So this is very detailed, right? But normally you can put in some numbers that are common for light bulbs or common for fans and common for these appliances. But it is always good to know as accurately as possible what are the powers for these things. For the sake of this calculation, we're going to take a light bulb of 40 watts, and this is not uncommon. Again, this is a typical value for light bulbs. You can find some 10 watts, 20 watts, 40 watts, 50 watts, 60 watts, 80 watts, 100 watts light bulbs. Depending on the kind of light bulb, you can even have 500 watt bulbs. But let's take a 40 watt bulb. And how many of these bulbs are in this house? Remember, we picked 2. We said this house only has 2 light bulbs. That house is probably me living there, right? No, actually, I love a lot of lights. It will have many bulbs if I really want. So anyway, now, how many peaks on hours, right? Sorry, not peaks on hours. How long do we run these light bulbs for? Let's take 10 hours a day. So I'm going to say 10 hours a day. Each of those light bulbs are running for 10 hours, right? So that is that. And then for this guy, typical fan, let's say 80 watt. And let's say, in this house, we said there is only 1 fan. And then let's say we run it again for how many hours? Let's say 10 hours. I don't mind that. And when we add it, right, when we do that, the load for B is equal to 40 watt times 2 times 10 hours. So what do we get? 800 watt hours. So you don't forget the units. 800 watt hours. And then the load for the fan is equal to 80 watt times 1 times 10 hours. Turns out, coincidentally, another 800 watt hour. So if we add these two up, then our total load. And remember, these 10 hours and 10 hours we're picking here, this is the hour in the 24-hour period. Whether this light bulb is on during the day and during the night, you are thinking of how long they are on. That's the hour you are putting here, the total hours within a 24-hour period, so that you can be able to calculate the total load within that 24-hour period. Remember, then it's equal to the sum of these two, and that will give you your 1600 watt hour. Or if you are representing this in the kilowatt hour, remember we talk about kilowatt, then you will say this is 1.6 kilowatt hour. So this is your total load, guys. So now that we know the total load for this tiny home, let us now go ahead and start to calculate the size of the power, the panel system that you need. So remember, when you reach out and ask, for many of you who reach out and say, hey, can you help me decide, like, what is this thing I need to buy? Like, how many panels, what types of panels? These are the calculations that need to happen. So you, as the client reaching out, right, even though this is pro bono work I've been doing, you need to be able to tell us what types of appliances you are using, how many of them. You need to have a list of all of them. This is why I asked each and every one of you who have reached out to do this, because this is the math that needs to be done for your home. So imagine this is just a very small list of equipment here. We're not even talking about your huge refrigerator, your washer machine and dryer machine. And by the way, appliances that require heating of spaces or cooling are the ones that consume the most energy. For example, your AC system is one of the biggest consumer of energy in your home. And also the dryer of the washer dryer system. The washer will consume maybe less than 1/4 of the power that the dryer will consume. So those are the things that require high energy. And so for these two systems, and these values are not unrealistic. So these are realistic values, and you already see this is 1.6 kilowatt hour of energy. That is your total load. We have not calculated the system size. So let's do that now. And so remember, our system size is the total load. We already know that. And now we need to divide by the efficiency of the system multiplied by the peak sun hours. And we are doing this for Liberia. So let's do our panel size is equal to the total load. We got it was 1600 watt hours. The system efficiency, normally it is not uncommon to find system efficiency of something like 90% efficiency. So instead of writing 90% efficiency here, we're just going to write it as 0.9. Okay, but that is 90% efficiency. And then we need to multiply that by the peak sun hour in the area of your installation. Typically in Liberia, it's greater than 5, so we just represent it by 5. It's not a bad thing to say 5 hours. So we need to do this math. And when you do this math of this, you will get roughly something like 356 watts. So this is the power that needs to be generated by whatever quantity of solar panels you buy per hour for you to support your lifestyle. What's your lifestyle? Your lifestyle is that you have this huge collection of appliances, whole 2 light bulbs, you alone, and you have one fan, right? Okay, just kidding. But you have that to support. You better be able to generate this power by that system. So this is the first thing your technician will calculate before he can determine what to buy. So he knows this is the power that you need to be generating per hour in that region, taking into account your peak sun hour and the efficiency of the system he's targeting or they are targeting. Now, the next thing you want to do, what is the number of panels that you need? How do we calculate that? What is the formula for the number of panels you need? To know the number of panels you need to know this system size, right? So your panel size, right? So we already know the panel size. Now we need to know what is the power of each of the panel you are going to purchase. So you see how close we are coming from the math to the business side of things. You know your system size, but you have to know the power of the panel that you are going to buy in watts, right? So the panel of the module, let me call it the module. Let me not put the unit here. So you need to know the power of each of the solar panel module. So PM, power of the module you are going to buy. So you see where the business comes into play now. So you need to know, for example, you need to have a target in mind. What kind of panel you're going to buy? The brand of the panel, the power of each panel. So this is why the technician will be able to advise you based on this target he has in mind. For what is the power of the solar panel, he can be able to advise you on buy this quantity of panels. And by the way, when you buy this quantity of panels, it's always good to add a few more pieces of panels on top of what you calculate. Why? Because panels are fragile. During transportation, something could break. During installation, something could break. But at least you need to know the baseline. This is the exact number that you will need to install, the number of panels you need to install. And we will not stop here at the formula. We will apply the formula in this situation where we've just calculated your system size or your power of your system. So let's put in some numbers here now. So we calculated 356 watts that was needed, right? And then what is the panel of each module? Solar panels have varying power. For residential panels, there are some common values that these panels come with, and we'll use one typical value. Some of them can be 200, some of them can be 350, some of them can be 400 and 450. Okay, those are common values for residential panels because residential home panels, a lot of them go on the rooftop. They cannot be too large. For commercial systems, because it's a commercial installation, they can go on stilts, they can be on ground-mounted system, etc., etc. And we'll come to that point when we're doing the battery sizing. Because commercial systems require high voltage batteries, you can afford to have high voltage panels, right? So you can have very large panels, right? And the higher the power of each panel, each module, in general, the larger the panel is because you need to harvest and process all of that energy. Although there are panels that are smaller, they are super efficient. So a panel can be smaller, but still generating higher power than a panel that is bigger because the smaller panel is much more efficient. So every square inch of its surface is actually converting more sunlight into energy than a big panel that is less efficient. So that is why the efficiency of the panel is important. But let's come back to where we were. Let's stop digressing too much. So let's pick a value here. So the first type of panel I would pick is a panel of size 400 watts. So when you do this math, you know very well that this number you get here is going to be less than 1. But you know we are calculating number of panels. You cannot buy less than 1 panel. You cannot go and tell someone I want half panel, right? Should they cut out the cells and give you the cells to go? So the best thing you do is to round every time you do this math calculation. If you get a value that is a decimal value, always round it upwards. Even if you get something that is a 0.1, 0.01, round it upwards. Because remember, when we wrote this formula, we said we still need to add other numbers of panels because of accidents, right? So add some more numbers. So it is the same concept here. Even the baseline you calculate, when you calculate it, always round it up to the nearest whole number so that you do not go and be short of 1 panel. So here we will put 1, even though this math is less than 1. But the business sense tells us that we need 1 panel. So in this household, with this type of 400 watt panel, so for this calculation, where you need to generate this watt per hour, you want to buy, if you're buying a 400 watt panel, you better buy 1 of them. Or, because of this caveat here, you buy 2. 1 is the backup in case the other one breaks. But what you need for this job is 1 panel. But let's say if we were to choose a different panel size. So we went to buy panels and wanted to buy another one. Mind you, when you go to buy panels, the cost of the panel is also associated with the wattage, right? So sometimes you want to see the dollar per watt, right? So let's see the dollar per wattage of panels. So depending on how the size of the watt is, you get the dollar you're paying, you always divide the amount you're paying per the watt of the panel you're getting. It tells you your dollar efficiency, how much you are paying per watt. But suppose we still had the same house, but then we went to buy panels. We saw that the 200 watt panels were cheaper. So your panel size is 200 watts. So the question is, how many panels will you have to buy if you want to buy the 200 watt panels? If you do this again, you have to round it upwards to 2 panels. That is what you need. So now, when you do the dollar to watt conversion between, you looked at 2 panels on the market, you looked at the 400 watt panel, and you looked at the 200 watt panel. But for the 200 watt panel, you're not just going to buy 1, you're going to buy 2. So whatever you're spending for this, you have to multiply that dollar amount by 2, and then you compare what you will spend for this, right? And then you see which one is higher to make some trade-off between what you want to do. Besides the dollar amount trade-off you are making, there is also the trade-off of the difficulty of handling or installing 2 panels versus installing 1 panel. So typically, it may be that the surface area of your roof, if you're putting this panel on your roof, of the 400 watt panel, may be smaller than the surface area that you have to cover with these 2 200 watt panels. So all of that comes into play. Do you have enough surface area, or do you want a 400 watt panel that is so efficient but and has smaller size than the 200 watt panel that are not that efficient? So the surface, in fact, the surface area, the size of these 2 panels could be equal, but you need 2 of this. So I mean that you are going to cover more area of your roof with this system of panels. So those are the trade-offs you need to make when you are thinking about the type of panels, and that type of panel is important in this calculation as we saw. So there are some panels again of size 350, and if we were to use 350 here, go and do the math, that's your little homework, and come up with how many panels you will need if your panel size, each panel was 350 panels. Some panels are 360 panels too. So you can play around with these numbers. So what have we learned today? Let's go back. We learned that there are 3 major components of your solar installations: the panel, the inverter, and the battery. And we learned that the panel generates your power, the inverter manages your power, and the battery stores your power. Of all these 3 components, I would say the inverter is the most critical component here. Because without the inverter, and we need to demonstrate this a little bit more, without the inverter, my friend, there is no power coming into your home. So the inverter is the brain, the central nervous system of your entire solar power system. Without that inverter, you ain't going anywhere with your power system. So this is why the inverter is critical. And this thing I just demonstrated, it doesn't just mean the inverter is entirely missing, but it could also mean when your inverter breaks down, what happens? It means your entire system is down and you are not going anywhere. So this is why when you are buying these components, you need to think about which ones are the critical components and where do you get them from. They must be very reliable. A solar panel, one solar panel among 10 solar panels can break or can basically not last too long. And you can always go to the market, right? When I say to the market, you can go to the store close by and get a solar panel to replace that. That is one solar panel among many. The inverter, however, is very critical The lifespan of an inverter and the reputation of the company you're buying it from, the efficiency of the inverter, the type of charge controller that is in the inverter are all things to consider to buy you a very good inverter. The next thing I will talk about in terms of importance is the battery. The battery stores your energy. If you do not have the battery in this picture, then you're going to have a situation where basically you do not have any power stored for use at night. And then at night, you are going to have problems. So the lifespan of the battery, the capacity of the battery are important. You want to invest in your battery and at least have it to last very long. Even if you are buying a battery of 50% DOD, you want to make sure that a battery lasts long. You do not want to buy a battery every 2 years. So you want to buy a battery that lasts at least 10 years or more. And in terms of cost for these things, the battery cost and the panel cost usually are on the same footing because the generate and the store are very high cost. So they are normally roughly equal price. But the good thing about the battery is that you can generate a lot to support your daytime consumption and only a little bit store in your battery if you do not have the money to buy all of your batteries. And we'll get to that point where you compute the number of batteries you need. But if you don't have money to buy all of that batteries, you can keep accumulating, adding the battery capacity to your battery bank. But you can have few in place initially so that it can just at least support you for a night. But the battery cost is a high cost and you want to buy batteries from a reputable place. Because another thing to consider besides the lifespan of the battery is the hazard, the risk that battery introduces. A battery can catch fire and that can basically cause a lot of losses beyond just the loss of the battery bank, right? It could cause the loss of homes. So you also want to buy batteries from very reputable companies. Particularly when this battery you are installing is in commercial installation where the battery is a high voltage battery. Those batteries have a lot of risk in terms of fire. So you want to buy batteries that have fire arresters. But we'll not get into all of that. The point I want to make, even at the residential level, batteries can still cause fire. So your battery and your inverter are two things that I will advise you to make sure you are buying from a reputable country, reputable manufacturer, and we'll come to the country idea. Reputable manufacturer that you trust. And that is one reason why I normally, and I will, when I'm buying the batteries and the inverter, actually I'm doing those now, putting in my orders, I'm buying them from companies within the US. We'll talk about that later. Because there is quality assurance that I'm guaranteed and looking at customer reviews. For me to, now mind you, some of these batteries that I'm buying from the US are actually manufactured in China. Or the inverter itself is manufactured in China. But why am I paying the high cost here for these two components in the US? These ones, the panels, I can buy from China. Why? Because China produces some of the best solar panels, but you need to know the reputable manufacturers in China that are producing these great tier 1 solar panels before you can buy them from those companies. So for solar panels, I'm comfortable in buying as long as I'm buying those identified, reputable solar panel brands. If I'm buying those from China, I am happy with that because China is actually a world leader in quality panel manufacturing. However, within the Chinese market, there are also dodgy players. So you do not just go and buy panels from China blindly. There are many more bad manufacturers of panels in China than there are good manufacturers of panels. Except that, among the top manufacturers of panels, some of the best are found in China. So you have to read between the lines here. So I can buy this from China, these two from the US. Why? And I mentioned that even these, the ones you or I may be buying from the US, are actually manufactured in China. Why are we buying it from the US and paying, for example, 4 times the cost you will buy these from China? And I'm not exaggerating. Typically, you will buy 4 times the cost you will pay for these in China if you are buying from the US. The reason is simple. There is a concept called QA. Let me pick a pen here. QA. Quality assurance. The companies in the US, their technicians and engineers design these things and they specify what components are here with all of the safety mechanisms in the battery and in these inverters so that you do not have fire outbreak that spreads to your home like the fire arresters, etc. that are found in batteries, and even in inverters. They have fire stopping mechanisms in some of the best brands of inverters in the US. Are you guaranteed of those from a manufacturer in China, you as an individual buyers? Likely, no. But for the business, for the engineering teams in the US, they strike a deal, they are a bigger company. So basically they have a special system of QAing what the manufacturer is producing for them in China. And it's because they have that big contract, the manufacturer in China must adhere to all of the QA specifications of these companies in the US. Besides that, the best companies, the reputable ones in the US that produce these components at a very great level of quality, besides the relationship they have with those Chinese vendors who must adhere to their QA policies, they also, after those components arrive, they also test batches of those components before they can release them to the market. So every new product they produce, they test them thoroughly, send them back to China if there is any problem. And I have specific brands, producers of inverters in the US that I know do that for certainty, and those are the ones you want to buy inverters from. Similarly, for the batteries. So why am I paying this 4 times the higher price from China? Because they are doing QA. I, as a single individual, do not have the ability to force the Chinese companies to ensure QA. Also, because I do not have the skills to sit down and design all of the micro components of an inverter. So that means I have to build an inverter, then carry the sheet to China and say, follow these instructions and build this. I do not have the time, nor do I have the technical know-how to do these things from scratch. So the companies have those technical know-hows, they design their components, right? And they protect their intellectual property and go to China and say, manufacture this thing for us, because manufacturing here may be cheaper than manufacturing in the US. Mind you, having said that, some of these companies actually now manufacture their components here in the US. And also the sub-components that are in these big components, like the batteries, etc., etc. Those sub-components are manufactured by different vendors. They are all contributing parts to producing these products. The companies in the US pay careful attention to the components that are coming from various vendors to go into this thing. They make sure they have specified quality assurances for all of those streams. I, as an individual, do not have time to do that, even if I had the technical know-how to build an inverter. I don't have the bandwidth to handle all of that communications and holding people accountable to those things. This is why someone goes ahead and set up a company and does that. And the higher price now that we are paying as individuals to buy from this company is to pay for all of that resources they invested in it. So when you see an inverter or a battery, and basically I don't own any share in these companies, by the way, so don't see this as me advocating for their high cost products. It pains me to pay this high cost for these products, but I am paying for a value that I understand. So I understand the logic of this is what I'm trying to explain. So I'm not saying also that you cannot find good inverters and good batteries from Chinese manufacturers. I'm saying personally, I have not found that guaranteed. When I search to look for customer reviews, etc., I do not find enough signal to have that confidence in the Chinese manufacturers of all the inverters and batteries that I have inspected. This set of things that I've inspected is not a universal set of things produced by Chinese manufacturers. I'm just saying of all the things I know. So anyways, I think we need to come back. The point of this long discussion really is to help people, because some clients sometimes when we are talking about these things, they say, oh, someone send me a link. I can buy this thing from China, or I can buy this thing from Turkey, or I can buy it from here and there. The person said these products are great. They show me pictures, etc., etc. Pictures do not tell you the capacity, the efficiency, the components that are in these things. So you can be a little bit lax on the quality of panels you are getting. But these two, my advice would be to take time, carefully consider what brand you are buying, where you are buying it from, i.e. the reputation of the company from which you buy these things. That would be my advice. Anyways, this page here, we learned the 3 big components of your solar installation. We learn certain things like the depth of discharge for the battery, and it's critical, and we'll see that later on down the line. And we talk about the efficiency of your inverter, and we talk about setting charge controller called the MPPT, the maximum power point tracker, which is the most efficient so far that we know of. There could be another modern one coming out that could be better than this, but so far, these are the most efficient ones. They are the ones that we advise you to get in terms of the charge controller in your inverter. And then we talk about the panel, the solar panels. We talk about the efficiency of the panels, and then we talk about how to basically calculate your panel size, right? That means your power comes from the panel. And we said this is the formula that you use. We talk about how significant the peaks on hours is here. And then we calculate your total load, an example of the total load here for a home with 2 light bulbs and a fan. And then what did we do next? We did use that value of the total load to calculate what would be your power of your solar system. And then from there, we went down to the business and the customer pressing question is, but how many panels do I need to buy? And we calculated that. And we also did some business analysis in terms of like you have choices, flexibility of picking what panel, because different brand of panel will have different powers of each of their panels, and a single brand can have different categories of panels with different power sizes. So all of these choices you can make. And now we just went over all of them, how to talk about your dollar efficiency, then spent per watt, right? and how to make those choices when you are deciding on the number of panels to use. So we'll stop here for today's talk, and then we'll leave the rest of the 3 components discussions down the line in subsequent videos. I hope this is helpful for you, and we will see you in subsequent ones. Bye-bye.